My phone vibrated violently at exactly 8:15 a.m. with 63 missed calls, a frantic barrage of furious text messages, and a voicemail from my mother screaming that I had utterly ruined my brother's life. Just 12 hours earlier, my younger brother James had sent me a demanding text. "I need a new car. You'll co-sign." When I replied with a simple "dream on," my mother instantly stepped in, threatening to permanently cut me off from all future family events if I dared refuse. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They thought my silence meant submission. But they completely forgot that the massive family safety net they had been comfortably abusing for years didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. That night, I called the bank and canceled the shared credit line. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from right now down below. My name is Scarlet, and at 32 years old, I have spent my entire adult life building a career as a financial analyst. I pride myself on predictability, meticulous budgeting, and keeping my credit score absolutely flawless. My 26-year-old brother James, on the other hand, lives in a completely different reality. To James, money isn't something you earn through hard work. It's an infinite resource provided by anyone too exhausted to say no to him. Our mother has spent his entire life enabling this behavior, sheltering her golden child from every single consequence of his terrible financial decisions. Last night, that toxic family dynamic hit a breaking point. I was sitting on my couch, finally relaxing after a grueling 10-hour workday, when my phone lit up with a text message from James. There was no greeting, no "how are you?" and absolutely no humility. It simply read, "I need a new car. You'll co-sign." He didn't want a reliable, budget-friendly commuter vehicle either. He was standing at a dealership eyeing a brand-new, high-end luxury sedan that he couldn't possibly afford. He expected me to legally tie myself to a massive 5-year loan just so he could look rich to his friends. When I read those words, a familiar knot formed in my stomach. For years, I had quietly smoothed things over just to keep the peace, but looking at that demanding text, something inside me finally snapped. My reply was short, sharp, and non-negotiable. "Dream on." I hit send and tossed my phone onto the coffee table, determined not to let James's entitlement ruin my evening. But when you deal with a golden child, you aren't just dealing with them. You are dealing with the entire system that created them. Exactly 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated again. This time, it was a wall of text from my mother. Her message was dripping with calculated anger. "Refuse, and you're cut off from family events." She went on to accuse me of being selfish, cold-hearted, and uncaring about my own brother's future, claiming that a good sister would do whatever it takes to help her family succeed. The threat of banishment cut deep, and for a split second, the old guilt tried to creep back in. Over the years, I had compromised my own boundaries countless times just to keep our family gatherings from turning into emotional battlefields. I had paid for dinners, covered shortfalls, and swallowed my pride just to maintain the illusion of a happy, supportive home. But as I stared at her text, the guilt suddenly burned away, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They weren't asking for my help. They were demanding my financial submission, completely weaponizing my relationship with the family to force my hand. This wasn't love. It was emotional extortion. I realized right then that if keeping the peace meant allowing them to destroy my financial future, then the peace wasn't worth keeping anymore. Before I made my next move, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and began logging into my various financial portals to assess my risk. I knew James was reckless, but I never imagined the depth of the betrayal waiting for me on the screen. Years ago, right after college, my mother had convinced me to open a shared line of credit with her. She argued it was strictly for genuine family emergencies. a safety net in case of a medical crisis or unexpected disaster. Because I trusted her, I had kept the account open and rarely checked it, assuming it was sitting completely untouched. As the transaction history loaded, my blood ran completely cold. The credit line wasn't empty. In fact, it was pushed to its absolute limit, hovering just dollars away from maxing out. But there were no hospital bills or emergency car repairs listed. Instead, the statements were filled with a steady stream of luxury expenses over the past 6 months. There were charges for high-end designer clothes, trendy electronics, 5-star weekend getaways, and VIP bottle service at clubs James frequented. My mother hadn't used the card for emergencies. She had secretly handed the credit line over to James, letting him fund a lavish lifestyle on my credit score while leaving me legally liable for every single penny. They had been systematically draining my financial security behind my back, confident that I would never find out. Driven by a cold sense of fury and absolute clarity, I spent the midnight hours systematically detaching myself from my family's financial parasites. I was no longer the passive daughter or the pushover sister. I was a financial analyst protecting her life's work. I picked up the phone and called the bank's emergency customer service line. I didn't just request a freeze on the account, I requested a complete permanent liquidation and closure of the shared credit line. Because the account was legally in my name as the primary account holder, the bank representative followed my instructions without hesitation, pulling up the files and initiating the shutdown. The representative asked if I wanted to dispute the unauthorized charges, but I had a much better plan. I explicitly instructed the bank to transition the entire outstanding balance, every single dollar of James's luxury vacations, designer clothes, and club nights, directly onto the secondary authorized user, my mother. I stripped James's card of its validity and completely severed our financial ties, ensuring that my pristine credit score remained entirely untouched by their greed. By the time I finally closed my laptop at 2 a.m, the massive financial safety net they had been comfortably abusing for years was completely gone. I went to bed feeling a strange sense of peace, knowing that I had successfully shifted the weight of their bad choices entirely back onto their own shoulders. I knew the morning would bring chaos, but for the first time in my life, I was ready for it. At exactly 8:15 a.m., the financial earthquake I had set in motion hit my family with full force. I was sitting at my kitchen island, sipping my morning coffee in complete silence, when my phone suddenly began to vibrate so violently it practically slid across the counter. The screen lit up with a relentless, terrifying barrage of notifications. 63 missed calls from James and my mother flooded my screen in a matter of minutes, accompanied by a frantic wave of unhinged text messages and high-pitched voicemails. It was the exact chaotic climax I had anticipated when I initiated the shutdown the night before. The reason for their absolute panic became clear when I listened to the first screaming voicemail from my brother. James was currently standing inside the showroom of the luxury car dealership, surrounded by sales representatives, with his shiny new sedan parked right out front. He had swaggered up to the finance desk, completely confident that my credit line would cover his massive down payment. But when the dealer ran the card, it didn't just decline, the system flagged the account as entirely closed and terminated. His grand illusion of wealth shattered instantly right in front of the dealership staff. To make matters worse for them, my mother had simultaneously received an automated alert from the bank, notifying her that the entire outstanding balance of James's secret luxury spending had been legally transferred to her name. They were trapped at the dealership, completely humiliated, and facing a mountain of debt they had never intended to pay back. They had tried to back me into a corner with an ultimatum, but by 8:15 a.m., they were the ones staring down the barrel of total financial ruin. I didn't have to wait long for the final showdown. Less than an hour later, the front door to my apartment practically rattled on its hinges. I opened it to find my mother and James standing on the welcome mat, their faces twisted in a mixture of raw fury and desperation. They pushed past me into my living room, immediately launching into a loud, coordinated assault. James was pacing back and forth, screaming that I had humiliated him in front of the entire dealership, while my mother held up her phone, demanding that I call the bank immediately to reverse what she called a vicious, accidental glitch on our shared account. They tried every single guilt trip in the book, calling me ungrateful, cold-hearted, and a traitor to my own blood. But I just stood there, leaning calmly against the kitchen counter, letting them exhaust themselves. When they finally paused to catch their breath, expecting me to break down and apologize, I played my winning hand. I walked over to the dining table, picked up a thick folder of printed documents, and slammed it down right in front of them. It contained itemized statements of every single cent James had secretly spent on that emergency credit line over the last 6 months. I looked my mother straight in the eyes and told her that there was no glitch. I exposed their entire secret scheme right then and there, detailing the luxury trips, the designer clothes, and the club nights. I made it beautifully clear that if they didn't take their screaming and leave my apartment immediately, my very next call wouldn't be to the bank. It would be to the police to file formal fraud charges against James. The threat of legal action took the air right out of the room. Realizing they had lost all their leverage, my mother and James slinked out of my apartment in absolute silence. The financial fallout over the next few weeks was swift and completely deserved. Because my mother couldn't afford to pay off James's massive luxury debt, she had to cancel her own upcoming travel plans and downsize her lifestyle significantly. James was forced to move out of his expensive rental apartment, sell his designer clothes online for pennies on the dollar, and take a realistic entry-level job just to make ends meet. Today, he drives a beat-up 15-year-old used compact car, and he pays for every single drop of gas himself. As for me, the peace of mind I gained was worth every bit of the family drama. By standing my ground and refusing to let them manipulate me, I saved my financial future and finally freed myself from decades of toxic emotional blackmail. I am still successfully working as a financial analyst, and my credit score remains completely untouched and pristine. Now, I'm curious about all of you who have listened to my story until the end. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have shut down the credit line, or would you have given in to keep the peace? Comment your thoughts below. Don't forget to check out the 2 videos on the screen right now for more shocking stories. Thank you for watching.